I left my home and went to live with my uncle because my parents didn't want me to study. Years later, when uncle left me all his inheritance, my parents also wanted to share it. I'm a 22-year-old guy living with my parents and younger brother in a small town called Millbrook. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and family traditions run deep. My family has been here for generations, working the same jobs, living in the same houses, and following the same routines. From as far back as I can remember, I've always been different from the rest of my family. While my dad and brother could spend hours tinkering with car engines or fixing things around the house, I was always more interested in books and learning. I remember being 5 years old and begging my mom to teach me how to read before I started school. She thought it was cute at first, but as I grew older, my parents started to see my interests as a problem. My whole life, I've wanted to study and make something of myself beyond the confines of Millbrook, but my parents have always pushed me to work instead. They say education is a waste of time and money and that I need to contribute to the family income like everyone else in town. Books won't put food on the table, my dad would always say. He's worked at the local steel mill for 30 years, just like his father before him. It's honest work, but it's also backbreaking and dangerous. I've seen how it's worn him down over the years, how his hands shake from the constant vibrations of the machinery, how he comes home covered in grime and too exhausted to do anything but collapse in front of the TV. The thing is, I'm not built for that kind of work. I've tried, believe me. When I was 16, I spent a summer working at the mill with my dad. It was a disaster. I was slow, clumsy, and constantly making mistakes. The other workers would laugh at me behind my back, calling me professor because I was always asking questions instead of just doing the job. I've tried other jobs too, stocking shelves at the local grocery store, mowing lawns, even a stint at the fast food joint on the edge of town. But no matter what I do, I always end up exhausted and miserable. My parents don't understand this at all. They constantly scold me, calling me lazy and worthless. My dad even says I'm not a real man because I can't handle hard work like he does. You need to toughen up, he'd say, his voice gruff with disappointment. The world doesn't care about your feelings. It's about putting in the work and providing for your family. My younger brother Mike is the opposite of me. He's always helping dad with repairs around the house. He dropped out of high school last year to work full-time at the mill, and my parents couldn't be prouder. They praise him constantly, which only makes me feel worse about myself. I've always been more interested in books and learning. When I was a kid, I used to sneak out to the local library and spend hours reading. Mrs. E. Johnson, the librarian, would always save the new arrivals for me, knowing how much I love to learn about different places and ideas. I dream about going to college and becoming a teacher or a writer. I imagine living in a big city, surrounded by museums and theaters and people from all walks of life. But whenever I mention this to my parents, they'd laugh it off or get angry. College is for rich people, my mom would say. People like us, we work with our hands. That's how it's always been. There was a time when I thought I might have an ally in my mom. She used to be a voracious reader herself, always with a paperback tucked in her apron pocket. But life and work wore her down too, and now she spends her evenings watching reality TV shows, too tired to even pick up a book. Last week, everything changed when my grandfather passed away. He was my dad's father, and they hadn't spoken in years due to some old family feud. I never knew the details, but it had something to do with my grandfather disapproving of my dad dropping out of school to work at the mill. The funeral was a somber affair, with half the town showing up to pay their respects. That's when I met my Uncle Jack for the first time. He's my dad's younger brother, and he left home when he was around my age. He hadn't been in contact with the family since. I overheard my parents talking about him before he arrived, saying he was a disgrace who abandoned his family. Thinks he's too good for us now, my dad grumbled, living in the big city with his fancy job. When Uncle Jack showed up, I was shocked. He was nothing like I expected. He wore a neat charcoal suit that looked expensive, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence I'd never seen in anyone from Millbrook. During the funeral, I noticed him watching me closely, a thoughtful expression on his face. After the service, while my parents were busy talking to other relatives, Uncle Jack approached me. He asked me about my life, and for the first time in years, I felt like someone was actually listening to me. I told him about my dreams of studying and how my parents kept pushing me to work instead. Uncle Jack's eyes lit up, and he shared that he had been in the same situation when he was my age. His parents, my grandparents, had tried to force him to work in the family business, but he wanted to study. So one day, he packed his bags and left for the city. He told me how he put himself through college, working part-time jobs to pay for his education. It wasn't easy, but he eventually graduated and built a successful career in finance. Now he owns his own investment firm in the city. I was amazed by his story. It was like looking at a version of myself who had actually achieved his dreams. Uncle Jack must have seen something in me because he made me an offer that would change my life. He invited me to come live with him in the city. He said he'd help me enroll in college and support me while I studied. I couldn't believe it. It was everything I'd ever wanted. When I told my parents about Uncle Jack's offer, all hell broke loose. They accused him of trying to steal me away and turn me against them. My dad called Uncle Jack all sorts of names, saying he was selfish and had abandoned the family. "You want to leave us too?" My mom cried, tears streaming down her face. "After everything we've done for you?" But I knew this was my only chance to escape and pursue my dreams. So despite my parents' anger and my brother's confusion, I packed my bags and left with Uncle Jack the next day. The drive to the city was quiet at first. I was lost in thoughts about what I was leaving behind and what lay ahead. Uncle Jack seemed to sense my turmoil. "I know it's not easy," he said, breaking the silence. "Leaving everything you know behind. But sometimes we have to make hard choices to grow." As we drove, he told me more about his own journey. How scared he was when he first arrived in the city. How overwhelming everything seemed. But he also spoke about the excitement of learning new things, of meeting people from all walks of life, of gradually building the life he had always dreamed of. "It won't be easy," he warned me. "There will be times when you'll doubt yourself, when you'll miss home so much it hurts. But if this is really what you want, it'll all be worth it in the end." It's been a week since I moved to the city with Uncle Jack. I'm still adjusting to the busy urban life, but I feel more alive than I have in years. The city is everything I imagined and more. The towering buildings, the diverse crowds of people, the constant hum of activity, it's exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Uncle Jack lives in a spacious apartment in a high-rise building. My room has a view of the city skyline, and I often find myself staring out the window, still not quite believing that I'm really here. Uncle Jack is helping me prepare for college entrance exams. We spend our evenings going over practice tests and discussing different subjects. He's patient and encouraging, never making me feel stupid when I don't understand something right away. I know my parents are furious with me. They've been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between guilt-tripping me and threatening to disown me. My mom's messages break my heart. She keeps asking if she did something wrong, if this is her fault somehow. My dad's messages are angrier, calling me ungrateful and accusing Uncle Jack of brainwashing me. But I'm standing firm in my decision. I need to do this for myself. I can't go back to feeling trapped and misunderstood. I can't give up this chance to build a different life. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm grateful for this opportunity. Uncle Jack has given me a chance to break free from the cycle of expectations that was suffocating me back home. I hope that one day my parents will understand why I had to leave, but for now, I'm focusing on building the life I've always dreamed of. Am I wrong for leaving my family behind to pursue my education? Should I have stayed and tried to make things work? I'd appreciate any advice or similar experiences from others who have been in this situation. Update: it's been 6 months since I moved to the city with Uncle Jack, and a lot has changed. I wanted to give you all an update on my situation. First off, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and encouragement meant a lot to me during those first difficult weeks away from home. Living with Uncle Jack has been an eye-opening experience. He's become more than just an uncle to me, he's a mentor and a friend. Every day, I learned something new from him, not just about academics but about life in general. With Uncle Jack's help, I managed to enroll in a local community college. I'm taking general education courses while I figure out what I want to major in. The classes are challenging, but I'm loving every minute of it. It's amazing how different learning feels when you're doing it because you want to, not because you're being forced to. My favorite class so far has been Introduction to Philosophy. The professor, Dr. Martinez, is this energetic woman who makes us question everything we think we know about the world. It's so different from the rote learning I was used to in high school. We have debates in class, and for the first time in my life, I feel like my opinions are valued. Uncle Jack has been incredibly supportive. He's helping me with my studies, teaching me how to manage my time and money, and even introducing me to his colleagues in various fields to give me an idea of different career paths. One thing that surprised me about Uncle Jack is how he never married. He told me about his past relationships and how his dedication to his career often got in the way. It's made me think a lot about work-life balance and what I want for my own future. Uncle Jack shared a particularly poignant story about a woman named Sarah he dated in his 30s. They were together for 3 years and even talked about marriage, but in the end, Sarah felt that Jack was more committed to his work than to their relationship. "I thought I could have it all," he told me one night over dinner, "but sometimes you have to make choices. I chose my career, and while I don't regret it, I do wonder sometimes about the road not taken." As for my family back home, things are still tense. My parents have stopped calling every day, but they still reach out occasionally. The conversations are always strained. They keep asking when I'm coming back, telling me I'm wasting my time and money on education. My mom tries to guilt-trip me by talking about how much they miss me and how empty the house feels without me. My dad, on the other hand, alternates between anger and dismissal. "When you're done playing student," he said in our last call, "your job at the mill will be waiting for you." My younger brother Mike, though, has been surprisingly supportive. We text regularly, and he seems genuinely interested in hearing about my new life. He even mentioned that he's thinking about taking some night classes at the local technical school, which is a big step for him. There have been moments when I've doubted my decision. City life can be overwhelming sometimes, and there are days when I miss the familiarity of Millbrook, the constant noise, the crowds, the fast pace of everything. It can be a lot to handle. I miss simple things too, the smell of pine trees, the sound of crickets at night, Mrs. Johnson's smile when I check out a new book at the library. There are days when the homesickness hits me hard, and I wonder if I made a mistake. But then I remind myself of how miserable I was there, how trapped I felt, and I know I made the right choice. I think about the future I'm building for myself, the opportunities I have now that I never would have had in Millbrook, and it gives me the strength to keep going. Uncle Jack has been helping me work through these feelings. He shared more about his own experience of leaving home. It wasn't easy for him either, but he said the hardest choices often lead to the greatest growth. One of the most challenging aspects has been making new friends. I was always a bit of a loner back home, and the city can feel isolating at times. But I've started joining study groups and attending some campus events, which has helped me meet people with similar interests. There's a guy in my philosophy class, Alex, who I've been hanging out with lately. He's from a small town too, so he understands a lot of what I'm going through. We often grab coffee after class and talk for hours about everything from our hometown experiences to our dreams for the future. Financially, things are tight but manageable. Uncle Jack is covering my living expenses, but I've taken a part-time job at a local bookstore to contribute what I can and save for my future. It's not always easy balancing work and studies, but it's teaching me valuable time management skills. Working at the bookstore has been a dream come true in many ways. I'm surrounded by books all day, and I get to talk to people about literature and ideas. It's so different from any job I had back in Millbrook. My manager, Lisa, is incredibly supportive of my studies and always makes sure my work schedule doesn't conflict with my classes. As I look back on the past 6 months, I'm amazed at how much I've grown. I'm more confident, more independent, and more excited about my future than I've ever been. I know I have a long way to go, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm on the right path. I'm curious to hear from others who have made similar life changes. How did you handle the guilt and doubt? And for those who have been estranged from family, did you ever manage to rebuild those relationships? Any advice would be appreciated. Update: I have some significant news to share. I apologize for the long silence, but life has been a whirlwind of changes and challenges. The good news is I graduated from college last year with a degree in business administration. It wasn't easy, but with Uncle Jack's support and my own determination, I made it through. I even managed to land a job at a startup company right after graduation. The journey to get here wasn't smooth. After community college, I transferred to a 4-year university. The workload was intense, and there were many sleepless nights spent studying or working on projects, but I loved every minute of it. I joined the debate club, wrote for the school newspaper, and even studied abroad for a semester in Spain. That semester abroad was a turning point for me. It opened my eyes to how big and diverse the world really is. I made friends from all over the globe, tried new foods, and learned bits of new languages. It made me realize how limited my worldview had been growing up in Millbrook. Uncle Jack was there at my graduation ceremony, beaming with pride. It meant the world to me to have him there, especially since my parents refused to attend. They still hadn't accepted my choice to pursue education, even after all these years. I invited them, of course. I even offered to pay for their travel expenses, but my dad refused outright, saying he wouldn't celebrate me wasting years of my life on useless knowledge. My mom was softer about it, but she still didn't come. She sent a card at least. It was something. Now for the difficult part of this update. 2 months ago, Uncle Jack passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. It was a shock to all of us, and I'm still struggling to come to terms with the loss. Uncle Jack wasn't just my uncle, he was my mentor, my supporter, and in many ways, the father figure I never had. The last conversation I had with Uncle Jack keeps replaying in my mind. We had dinner together to celebrate my new job. He was so proud, kept saying how he knew I had it in me all along. "You've come so far," he said, his eyes twinkling, "but remember, this is just the beginning. Keep learning, keep growing. The world is full of opportunities for those who aren't afraid to seize them." I never imagined it would be the last time I'd see him. The next morning, his housekeeper found him in his study. The doctor said it was quick and that he probably didn't suffer, but that's little consolation when I think about all the things left unsaid and all the advice I can no longer seek from him. In the wake of his passing, I discovered that Uncle Jack had left me everything in his will, his house, his savings, his investment firm, all of it was now mine. I was stunned by his generosity and the responsibility that came with it. When I called my parents to inform them about Uncle Jack's passing, their reaction was not what I expected. Instead of expressing condolences, they immediately started asking about the inheritance. They wanted to know how much money Uncle Jack had left and insisted that, as his family, they were entitled to a share. I was shocked by their greed. These were the same people who had cut ties with Uncle Jack years ago, who had criticized his choices and called him selfish. Now that he was gone and had left behind a substantial estate, they suddenly wanted to claim a part of it. My dad's voice was gruff on the phone with an undercurrent of excitement I'd never heard before. "So how much did the old man leave behind? Must be quite a fortune, eh? We're family too, you know. We deserve a share of it." My mom chimed in, her tone syrupy sweet, so different from the cold silence she'd maintained for years whenever Uncle Jack was mentioned. "Sweetie, you know we've always loved you. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. Don't you think it would be nice to share this blessing with your family?" Their words made me feel sick. I remembered all the times they dismissed Uncle Jack, all the cruel things they'd said about him, and now they wanted to profit from his death. When I told them that Uncle Jack had left everything to me, they became furious. They accused me of manipulating Uncle Jack, of turning him against the family. My father even threatened to contest the will in court. "You ungrateful little," my dad sputtered, his voice rising with each word, "after all we've done for you, you think you can just take everything for yourself? We'll see about that." My mom's approach was more subtle but no less manipulative. "Honey, think about what this money could do for the family. We could finally fix up the house, maybe even help your brother start his own business. Don't you want to help your family?" Their reaction made me realize that nothing had changed. They were still the same people who had tried to force me into a life I didn't want, who had belittled my dreams and ambitions. Now they were trying to take advantage of Uncle Jack's generosity. I made a difficult decision then. I told my parents that I would not be sharing the inheritance with them. I explained that Uncle Jack had left his estate to me for a reason, because I had chosen to follow in his footsteps, to value education and personal growth over blind loyalty to family expectations. Uncle Jack left this to me because he believed in me and the path I've chosen, I said, my voice shaking but determined. He supported me when you wouldn't. I'm not going to dishonor his memory by giving away what he worked so hard for to people who never appreciated him. My parents didn't take this well. They yelled, threatened, and tried to guilt-trip me, but I stood firm. When they tried to force the issue, I did something I never thought I'd do. I cut off all contact with them, just as Uncle Jack had done years ago. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. I couldn't keep trying to please people who would never understand or support my choices. The weeks following this decision were tough. I second-guessed myself constantly. Was I being too harsh? Should I have tried harder to make them understand? But every time I remembered their greedy reactions and their attempts to manipulate me, I knew I had made the right choice. So here I am now at a new crossroads in my life. I'm grieving the loss of Uncle Jack while also trying to manage the responsibility he's left me. I'm learning to run his investment firm with the help of his longtime employees, and I'm determined to honor his legacy. It's overwhelming at times. There's so much to learn about finance and business management, but I find myself thinking of Uncle Jack often, imagining what advice he would give me. Take it one day at a time, I can almost hear him say. You are smarter than you think. Trust yourself. I've also been thinking a lot about what I want to do with this unexpected wealth. Uncle Jack always emphasized the importance of giving back, of using one's success to help others. I'm considering setting up a scholarship fund for kids from small towns like Millbrook who want to pursue higher education but lack the means. As for my family, I don't know if we'll ever reconcile. Part of me hopes that one day they'll understand why I made the choices I did, but for now, I need to focus on building the life that Uncle Jack helped me start. My brother Mike still reaches out occasionally. He seems torn between loyalty to our parents and understanding my position. I hope that, in time, he'll forge his own path too. I'm sharing this update because I know many of you have been in similar situations with family and inheritance issues. How did you handle it? Did you ever regret cutting ties with family over money? Any advice would be appreciated as I navigate this new chapter of my life. Life is full of unexpected turns, and I never imagined I'd be in this position, but I'm grateful for the opportunities I've been given, and I'm determined to make the most of them. Uncle Jack believed in me, and I won't let him down.